Aloha, everyone, and welcome to another show of Staying Young at Heart. I'm Maria Mera. I'm your host, and I'm also a financial advisor with Edward Jones. And thanks to being a financial advisor, I have access to guests like the one today, Jerry Wilson. He's a certified financial planner, and he's been working as a financial planner for since the 70s. So you calculate the years, like 50 years. And he's been in Hawaii since 1967. So I asked him to come today and give us a little bit of the basics of estate planning, because there is nothing that can keep us more up at night and not making us stay too young, um, such as not knowing what we're going to do with our legacy, not taking care of our assets, not taking care of our families. So Jerry is going to help us with all this. So without any further ado, Jerry, thank you for joining us.
Well, thank you, Maria. I appreciate the opportunity to come and speak to your group. Uh, I wish I could say that everything I'm talking about today is cast in stone, although the stones are being smashed with hammers, both in the federal and the state level. So we can talk about the basics of tools that could be used, and some of the numbers might change. That's all.
Okay, and before you start, we want to tell everybody, if you need an attorney, you go to an attorney, right? If you want to talk about your trust, you go to an estate planning attorney. If you want to talk to your taxes, you go to a CPA, and if you want to talk about your portfolio or your investments, you come to a financial advisor. But so please go ahead. This today is going to be a little different. It's going to be more of a presentation format. So I'll try to be quiet, and then I will ask you some questions at the very end. So Jerry, please, the floor is yours.
Sure. Eric, if we could start with slide one. Basically, what we want to talk about today is the tools that can be used. And estate planning is an area that most people think you have to be a multi-millionaire to do. But it's very important for everyone to at least take a look at some of the tools that can be used, especially with some of the changes that might be coming forth. So if we could go to the next slide. The first thing that everyone should have is a last will and testament. And basically, that's something, as Maria said, you can go to an estate planning attorney and get that drafted, or there's simpler means for maybe $100 to $150 for a simple will. You can get that done on LegalZoom or something like that as well. There are other services out there if you don't have a lot of assets or a lot of money, but you should have a last will and testament. Basically, it talks about what you want to give away to who. Maybe you have specific jewelry or a particular car that's saved or something like that. And so what you're looking at there is using this as a means of making sure the people I want to have that item or whatever it might be gets that. Plus, it sets up some guardianship arrangements, some of the other things you can do. But the last will and testament is very important for everyone to have. Eric, next slide. And as we say, it's not just for the wealthy. It will help you avoid probate. And if you don't know what that means, is if you have assets that do not have beneficiaries on them, they end up going to the probate court, and it takes a lot of time. Everything's public record, so it's probably not the best thing to do. So you definitely want to have the will and maybe even trusts. A living trust, revocable living trust, is excellent to handle that. Also takes care of all the things that you didn't mention in your will. It rolls over into that revocable living trust. Again, you can get those at various prices around town from local attorneys, but if you have assets, it makes sense to get an estate planning attorney and do the correct thing on that.
I'm
Next slide.
going to interrupt you
Sure.
here, Jerry, just to make sure that our audience is understanding what is revocable.
Well, it's revocable in that that trust, as long as you're alive, you can change it. That's the big thing. And
So
we have
let's
both.
say,
We have revocable trust, and we have testamentary trusts, and those are ones that become effective at your death. And so that's the revocable becomes testamentary when you die. But up until then, you can make changes all the way along the way.
Okay, so just in case I get married and I put my spouse as the beneficiary, and then I get a divorce, and I should probably review that.
You can change that. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
That's a good time.
Okay.
We have that with
Okay.
life. Matter of fact, to be honest, we see it all the time where there's a divorce and there's life insurance policies, and the ex-wife is on there and the new wife is not. Becomes a real problem. Good thing he's dead at that point. So,
Oh my goodness. Okay.
yeah,
Yeah, he
next slide.
doesn't know.
Basically, just what we were just talking about here, the living trust is effective during your lifetime and it may be revised or revoked. The testamentary type trust is where it comes to be effective at death. And the living trust becomes testamentary upon the death of you, the settler. So it is a situation where it's good to have a trust. Trust does a lot of things. Matter of fact, Eric, next slide. It does a lot more than not just for the wealthy. It helps you if you do have management of assets, maybe real, particularly here in town. We have a lot of people have a lot of rental properties. What happens if you're incapacitated or you need some professional management? You can do it with someone within the trust that you name, or you could use even one of the local trust companies to kind of do that kind of stuff. But outside of those things, there's guardianships of children, much better to have here. And you might have a guardian for the assets, but you also may have a guardian for the person, and that might not be the same person. So you can do that in the trust, and it helps take care of making sure you get to the right people and the right people that you want in there. And again, it's revocable. You can change that along the way. So that's a good thing. Next slide.
How often would you recommend someone to review that trust? Every time there's a life change, or just have
Yeah,
like a
absolutely. Birth of a child, deaths. You could have your mother in there that changes things if she passes. So whenever there's a life change going on, marriage, divorce, births, deaths, those kinds of things, particularly a good time to do that, to review it at that point. Next slide. This is one that's durable power of attorney. This is basically like I may want to have Maria to be able to, if I'm incapacitated, this is not a medical situation, but that's kind of what we were just talking about in that last segment there, where you can appoint someone to manage your assets inside your trust. And that may be somebody that takes care of the finances and things like that, but does not have the capabilities of dealing with the medical situation. So if you're incapacitated, they can manage the assets for you, but not make the last will. And that's the next thing coming up. So if we can go to the next slide, Eric. This is the living will or a medical directive. There's different terms for it. Matter of fact, if you go online here in the state of Hawaii, they do have the advanced health directive that you can search on Google, and you can actually get a blank form and fill it out right there online in the state of Hawaii. So this is somebody that's going to make the decisions whether to pull the plug if you're, say, incapacitated, brain dead, whatever it might be, as they say. That's the person who's going to do that, or authorize surgery or whatever it might be. So that's the person who's acting in your stead in the medical community. And so it's also a very important thing to have, no matter how much asset you have or don't have. It's very, very important to have that. You can do that without having big trusts and all the other stuff. These are all separate documents that are there. Next slide. This one is kind of becoming more important all the time. This is a big deal. It's not legally binding, but it's a letter of instruction. And for those who have a lot of assets and they have like, I want to be cremated. I don't want to have a casket and be put in the ground. So maybe you make sure that you have that in a letter of instruction to people that that's what you would like to have. Or maybe something else, provide information to your executor who's running the trust of what do I want done with certain assets that are not specifically already in the trust, telling me I want this to go to Maria and this to go to Eric and so forth. Okay. So that's a outside document that just gives my feelings about what I want to do or have done, in addition to whatever might legally be in the trust or will. Next slide. Life insurance policy. Oh boy, here we go. This is the only place that the money shows up in a big lump sum when you actually need it. You can have all your money tied up in investments and things, but maybe if it's 2008 and the stock market dropped nearly 40% and you need cash to pay expenses and things, this is the only tool that we have that comes in with a lump sum of money when you die. Everyone else is coming with their hand out wanting cash, for all the expenses for everything else. This is the only guy that comes in with a check to give you the money to help pay that. So life insurance is very important. Whether if you're a young family, term insurance is probably a great way to go. A young family, young kids, things like that.
So term insurance is just for a period of years, right?
Yeah,
It's
for a
not
period of years.
it's not a permanent.
Yeah, the child rearing time, the 20, 25 years, something like that. And then as you get into it and you have more assets and you have more things to protect, maybe you're looking at a more permanent type of coverage, whether it would be a universal life, a whole life plan, a variable universal life, which kind of gives you the option of investing and getting the insurance at the same time. So there's several of those that can come in, but it's kind of important, no matter what stage you're in. It's just the type of policy would change probably with the age and the asset base. Next
Has
slide. Oh, go
have
ahead.
life insurance, have they changed a lot since COVID-19?
Yeah. There's several of the companies have reduced or made it more restrictive on getting policies over age 70 or 75.
Mhm.
Some of the carriers, now that they've got a better handle on the life expectancy on this, they're still beginning to open up so that you can, in fact, write policies. And for example, if you and I were married in an estate situation, we may want to have a joint and last survivor policy. And so even if I was uninsurable, but you were in great health, we could still get a joint and last survivor policy because you have great health, because it's really it's going to be paid on the last death, not on the first death.
Okay.
So, because I can pass all the assets to you that I have or do other kinds of planning without any taxation. But if I was passing it to my children or to my cousin or whatever, then that presents other problems there. So that's all, just a simple process there.
Mhm.
Next slide. This one, the numbers that are shown is what came out of the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act of 2017, which established the federal lifetime exemption at 11.18 million per person. Currently, that's 11.7 per person, or 23.4 million. Again, if Maria and I were married, we could give away up to 23.4 million and not be subject to any tax. Now, as I mentioned before, that's changing. Matter of fact, the state of Hawaii currently has an estate tax as well. Their exemption is 5.4, 5,490,000, which is what the 2017 exemption for the feds was back in 2017. So, but there's a provision or a bill being floated in the state of Hawaii to reduce that all the way down to $1 million. Now, I don't think that's going to fly, But the federal government is considering dropping it from 11.7 to 3.5 per person. So again, if you and I are married, that means we'd only have 7 million of exemption. And there's a lot of people in this town that would cover. They'd be hit by that. And we don't know what's going to happen. I haven't heard anything further from the state of Hawaii as to where they're going to end up, but there is provisions being talked about right now to reduce that exemption in the state of Hawaii as well. Hopefully it doesn't go down to 1 million, because anyone who owns a home in Hawaii and has any kind of assets is now going to be possibly subject to estate taxes. So it's going to be the full employment for CPAs, I think, if that happens from that standpoint.
So the state of Hawaii has a plan for you. Unless you change it, the state of Hawaii will have a plan for you.
Well, they have estate taxes as well. So they're one of the few states that has a separate estate tax over and above the federal estate tax. That's the big difference. Eric, next slide. Anything you own personally gets included in your estate, whether it's an IRA, pension plan, 401k, your life insurance policies that you own personally, any sizable gifts that you made prior to within about 3 years of death can be pulled back in as well. So when we talk about what's going to be subject to the estate tax, it can be rather substantial that's in there as well. But I think we all in the business feel that well, first of all, we just got a $1.9 trillion thing bill passed that we don't have the money, it's all paper. And now they've got a $2 trillion infrastructure thing that they're doing. Do you think taxes are going up or going down?
They're going up.
Yeah, more than likely they're going to go up, right? So the other thing is dead people don't vote unless they're in Chicago or some of the other states. But it's what. But that's why they want the estate tax, and they want to reduce it down. It's still today it's less than probably 1/2 of 1% that are even subject to the estate tax, or at least 5% or less that's subject to it. If they drop it back to the 3.5 million, you're probably going to find many, many more people. Most business owners that have a house and other things, they're probably going to be subject to the estate tax if that happens. And in the state of Hawaii as well, beyond the assets here. Next slide. As Maria was talking about early on, to do in a full estate plan, you need an attorney to draft the documents. So that durable power of attorney, the advanced health directive, you might be able to do just online here. But the durable power of attorney, you need that. You probably need the insurance person that you can talk to, or the financial advisor. Those two may be one and the same, like Maria does the investments, but you can also do the insurance. Tax professional, you're going to need, maybe not up front, but at some point in time, you'll have to have the CPA file the 706 form. Trust officer, many of the local trust companies, Bank of Hawaii, First Hawaiian, Central Pacific, all have trust companies. They don't charge you to go in and talk to them about trusts and setting up and finding your estate. So lots of times they'll come see you, Maria, or they'll come see somebody like me. We'll talk to them, and then we'll help set up an appointment with one of the trust companies, and that bring them in so that well, in the old days, we used to bring them in. I don't know if we're kind of a little bit like this maybe from now on, but that's kind of how it works. We get them to a trust person. They kind of walk through the whole thing with them, give them an idea of what the cost may be, and then make recommendations at that point. So, and that's all free of charge, usually from the local trust companies that are here. With that pretty much takes care of the basics of estate planning and why it's important for those even without a large estate to start doing some planning.
So this is a little bit like Legos, right? This is the basic, and then you start building on top of that.
Yeah, it really entails the assets that you have. What kind of assets you have, how much assets you have, what your goals, what are you planning to do with those? do you have written documentation as to what you want done with those assets? That's the big thing. Now, if you and I are married, we may have everything in joint and survivor basis there. So that passes without probate. It passes directly because it's a named beneficiary on an asset. But many real estate investments and things may be only in my name and not in yours. Because I may have a separate company I set up to manage my 10 rental properties or something like that. So those times you need to kind of sit down and say, okay, well, what do you have? Where's it at? Do you have a separate entity? All these things need to kind of be taken care of in that trust or will or however you're structuring it. Definitely a trust if you have a lot of assets like that.
So if you can put real estate in a trust, you can put any assets basically in a trust.
Savings accounts, you can do anything that you want in there. You may not have to, and you may not want to put it in the trust, like a savings account, checking account. You and I could have a joint account. If something happened to me, then you then have complete ownership and control of that account because it's joint. But and that passes outside of probate and all the other stuff that goes on there. So, but any assets that you have, it could be jewelry, could be a coin collection, stamp collection, art, could be
So
a lot of different things.
who pays for those taxes? Does the trust pays as a independent entity, or
Well,
who pay, or do I
generally,
pay as a taxpayer?
well, no, you're not going to pay because you're gone. But whoever is left,
Well, while I mean while like a living trust, right? Like
mhm.
if I'm setting a trust for whenever I pass,
uh,
who is the responsible of paying the taxes of the assets that are in that trust?
well, that's exactly what we were talking about. That's that person. There would be somebody, either an executor, or there could be a guardian of that business entity, other than the executor, and they're responsible for managing that business just as if I was still there. So the taxes that would normally be paid and all that would be done at that point. So it's
Hmm.
just a matter of um, that's what's in the trust, basically, the trust document. You decide that who's going to be the guardian of that business, who's going to be guardian of the children, who's going to be guardian of all different things that are there. So that's
Hmm.
why you have a written document, so there's no question, because I die, what happens? They're all going to come to you, and maybe you don't know anything about running that business at all. What's
Hmm.
going to happen? It's probably going to be sold at a liquidation, at a loss of assets at that point in time, because you need money, and the money's all tied up in real estate or something else. If you have it in investment accounts within the Jones system or something, well, at least you got cash there that could be converted over. But
Hmm.
those are the things. That's why the life insurance is so important if you have assets, because that brings in that big check, that big money that you need to pay all the taxes, state taxes, if there are some, and there could be a lot more with some of the changes that are going on. So that's the importance of life insurance in there, and you want to have that held properly, either with an outside owner or a trust. Put it in an irrevocable life insurance trust so it's not includable in your state. Notice we talked earlier, life insurance policy is owned by you or even owned by you. And if we were married, if it's owned by you, it still could be includable in the estate of my death, depending on how it's structured. So lots of times I see it structured where it comes in and it's going to be a taxable event anyway, even though they've tried to avoid it.
Hmm.
So,
Um, Another question that I had while you were doing the presentation,
uh-huh.
um, you were talking about the state of Hawaii. What if I have real estate property in Hawaii, but I also have real estate property in California? Or where should I have my trust? Or do I
Well,
need two?
the trust should be in the domicile that you're in. So if you're in Hawaii, it should probably be in Hawaii if that's where you live and that's where the bulk of your assets are. But it's very possible that you're going to have to file taxes both in Hawaii and California all of that would be includable in the federal, but you may have separate ones for each one of those states. So you have to just watch that too. So you do get you get a little bit of a write-off for the taxes you do pay in the state against some of the others as well. But it's an area that you have to watch, and that's why it's important. If you have assets in multiple states, you need an attorney to draft the documents properly to make sure that you avoid as much of the tax situation as you can.
Yeah, and I cannot stress that enough. If you need a trust or to a estate planning attorney, you can always come to us, and we can give you our ideal recommendations. But go interviewing, right? Same as when you go and find a personal trainer. Go interview and and find the one that works for you.
You don't charge. You don't have to charge to have anybody come talk to you, right? And so
Exactly. No,
I'm
not for the first time. Yeah.
Yeah. So
Okay.
same thing.
Yeah. So any other advice here that you have for those people who are just thinking about it, but they never find the time, or they never it's something that it's not even fun to talk about. So is there any words of encouragement that you have there?
Well, we have people that avoid it because they feel if they're planning their death, they're going to die. I mean, I'm seriously, we have people comment like that. We haven't had anybody do that yet. I've been doing this for a long time. Been doing estate planning since the late 70s. So, yeah, I haven't had anybody that came in and planned their estate and got dead right away. So, hopefully we can pass that rumor or that concern off. But it's hard because you got to sit down and look at your final numbers of things. What do you want to happen?
Yeah.
And most of us just go day to day and we invest here, or we do this, or we buy this house, or we do that, over, whatever it might be. And we don't really pay a whole lot of attention to putting all those things together, or even the wife knowing where everything's at. We get so
Yeah.
often we talk to the wife after the fellow's passed away, and they can't even find the will or the trust or anything else. They know he has one. The attorney has retired, and they didn't update it. If they did find it, it was from 30 years ago, and things have changed drastically. So it's something that you need to kind of keep up on. But it's something that it really is hard for the people you leave behind if you don't take the time to do just the basics, the will, trust, those kinds of things, the guardianship of the money, the guardianship of the assets, so that you have the kids, the things like that, and the advanced health directive, because it's very possible you could get run over or ran into in this town. Especially, I've seen
Oh my goodness.
21,000 tourists back in town again, so the roads are going to start getting crowded again. So
let's keep it light. Let's keep it light.
Well, no, I'm not talking about. I'm just saying there accidents happen all the time. So you don't. It might not be a heart attack or something like that. It could be an auto accident or something like that. That just incapacitates you, and so you need.
But I'm going to put a little bit more emphasis on have those conversations, right? Have that conversation with your wife, with your kids, with your parents, and I know some people are they just don't even want to talk about it, but it makes it. It's good communication. It's all for the long haul. It's much better to have those conversations.
Oh, yeah. Absolutely. Now, I encourage everyone to do that. I think we're coming up on the end of the time frame here. So with that, that's all I can say is I encourage everyone to, if they haven't looked at what they did years ago, they should pull it out and read it, or take a look at it and see how many things have changed. And maybe you need to get a hold of your attorney and make some amendments. It doesn't have to be the full cost. Most of the attorneys can amend the documents they did before for a lot less than the original. So with that said, estate planning basics, that's it. 101, I guess, from that standpoint.
Jerry and Maria out. Well, thank you very much, Jerry. That was super helpful. I hope for everybody. And again, it's just the basics. Just keep customizing your advice and finding those people who are going to give you the best advice. Jerry, thank you very much for joining us, for your time and for your knowledge.
Well, thank you, and thanks to ThinkTech. I appreciate that as well. Thank you.
Our pleasure. And thank you everybody for joining us, and we'll see you on our next show. Have a good afternoon.